Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. And I'm going to try not to jump around too terribly much, but so much has already been said that's intriguing to me. I want to start with you, Ms. Rajitsky. Your testimony referred to the United States comparative carbon advantage, and I appreciate that terminology. It also points out appropriately that the United States imported more than 1.2 gigatons of embodied emissions, mostly from China. And I appreciate, Dr. Ellis, you're referencing this as a global issue, right? And we tend to look inward and sort of beat ourselves up a little bit, in my view, too much, rather than looking at the global. And by the way, I love the idea of being the innovators and then exporting the innovation. We sometimes forget that most of what we export is brain power and innovation as well as raw products. But that said, according to data that was compiled by the CLC, goods manufactured in the United States use 40% more carbon efficient, or are 40% more carbon efficient than the world's average, but the U.S. imports 75% of its goods from less carbon efficient countries. So again, getting back to this global issue, getting back to trade policy as much as anything, it's why I often say that so much of our energy and environmental policy is inward, it's punitive, rather than recognizing, again, the global nature of all of this. So I want to get to the Prove It Act, obviously, is where I'm leading, and I appreciated Ms. Rajitsky bringing it up, because without good, solid data to demonstrate, the statistics I just used, I don't know that we can move forward as easily until we start proving that we really are more carbon efficient than the rest of the world. We've actually done a lot to bring down CO2 emissions in the United States. We really have been innovative, and rather than buying more steel from China, how about more steel from West Virginia or Indiana, or how about proving that a Bakken barrel of oil is cleaner than a Venezuelan barrel of oil? And in the cement sector especially, that's probably as obvious as it is anywhere. And I'm not saying we shouldn't always be striving to improve. It's not that. It's just that I think we beat ourselves up too much. So what's my point? My point is, I guess I'd just like maybe Ms. Rajitsky, if you would talk a little bit more about the Prove It Act and what you think, what value that could bring to the discussion. And then I just might ask you, Dr. Ellis, and you, Ms. Angelski, on the same topic of data collection while we try to forward, lean into the production. Ms. Rajitsky.
Thank you, Senator Cramer, for the question and for your bipartisan introduction of the Prove It Act. As you've mentioned already, and I've mentioned in my testimony, data is really the kind of first piece of the puzzle to start, as you said, proving that indeed much of U.S. production is already more emissions efficient than other countries, especially countries that we are importing our goods from. And so what the data allows us to do is really have this transparent reporting of this emissions intensity and the competitive advantage, the carbon advantage of U.S. production. The other thing it enables us to do is respond to when other countries are starting to think about their own policies. For example, the EU, as you probably know, is starting to implement their own carbon border adjustment mechanism. And by folks looking at existing carbon advantage of the US, such as CLC, they've noted that because of the US's carbon advantage, looking at the US imports into the EU versus, say, China's import to the EU, which are going to be more carbon intensive, the US actually stands to gain market share in the EU market with the EU CBAM in place. And so having things like Prove It will enable us to make sure that when those types of policies that other countries put in place come into fruition, that we can really make sure that they are fair and they are accurately representing the low emissions intensity of the US market.
Yeah, very well said. Dr. Ellis, anything more?
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. So the Europe carbon and border adjustment rule is very important for protecting against dirty imports. I'll also say that in the EU and in America, there's proliferation of EPDs, environmental product declarations. That's a nutritional label for cement materials that lists not only the embodied carbon of that material, but also the embodied energy and many of the other pollutants that Senator Markey mentioned affect the local communities in which these materials are made.
And I can speak to respect to clean hydrogen. Right now, the life cycle analysis and accounting methodology is already built into federal policy to qualify for clean hydrogen, whether it's tax credits or DOE grant funding. So that accounting system for tracking the emissions associated with production and use is already built into federal policy that will catalyze this industry. And it's really important to recognize that if there are industries that want to use clean hydrogen and that will purchase it at a premium price, for example, the carbon intensity value of that hydrogen is going to be the critical aspect of that, because there are industries that are going to want to be able to say, look, I'm using decarbonized hydrogen and it's reducing my product emissions by X amount, right? So, and that's the selling point and the value add, I'll just say, for clean hydrogen.
It looks to me like Prove It Act's sort of the low-hanging fruit in this group. But with that, Ms. Angelski, if I stick around long enough, I'm going to want to ask you, of course, about the Heartland Hydrogen Hub. But thank you for your work on that. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Senator.